Hello and welcome to Moments with the Master for this first day of November 2021. I am the Egg Friar, Father Josh from St. Martin's Celtic Catholic Church in Concord, North Carolina, joined with my brother Christopher from Olean, New York. We are recording this on All Hallows Eve, so happy All Hallows Eve to you. And you will be hopefully listening to this, all five of you, on All Saints Day. So happy All Saints Day to all the saints. We could sing.
I like the thought that, oh, good song. Have you heard the Indelible Grace version of that?
I have not.
I will send it to you. It's much better. I like the idea that we have a huge following in the cloud of witnesses. Like there's about 35 of them up there. They're like, oh yeah, my favorite show.
You know what? Mommy's watching us every week.
Mommy is watching us. Yes.
Yes. So the readings for this Sunday are Deuteronomy 6, verses 1 through 6, Psalm 18, verses 1 through 3, Hebrews 7, verses 23 to 28, and Mark chapter 12, verses 28 to 34. As always, we encourage you to read all these on your own. I am going to focus on the Old Testament lesson. When I was in Kuwait, one of the chaplains at the traditional Protestant service, he called it the First Testament, which I like a lot. I like that even better. I try to call it First Testament, but it doesn't mean a lot to most people. But anyway, but that the Deuteronomy passage is mirrored in the gospel. And I'm not going to really lean into that. There's a lot. I mean, I've preached multiple sermons on both of those passages, but Deuteronomy chapter 6, Moses summoned all Israel and said to them, now this is the commandment, the statutes and the ordinances, which the Lord your God commanded me to teach you, that you may do them in the land to which you are going over to possess it, that you may fear the Lord your God, you and your son's son, by keeping all his statutes and his commandments, which I command you all the days of your life, and that your days may be prolonged. Hear therefore, O Israel, and be careful to do them, that it may go well with you, that you may multiply greatly, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart. When I was in Israel with Marilyn back in 2011, we started every day with the New Testament version where Jesus adds the passage from Leviticus, and the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law hinges on these two commandments. But we would start the day with those two in Hebrew. So Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Ve'ahavta Adonai el Elohecha, B'chol levavcha, uve'chol nafshecha, uve'chol me'odecha, uve'chol... I can't remember the last one. It's been a minute.
Hebrew flex.
Yes, but I need to go back and relearn that. But it's very cool. For a while, we did it with the kids every day. I do want to point out, so it finishes, and I think this is actually the core of this. And I'm not going to read it because I've mostly got it memorized. This is the King Josh version. But hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one Lord. These words I command you this day shall be upon your heart, and you shall teach them to your children. You shall tell them when they lie down and when they get up, when you walk by the way. Shall be on the doorpost of your home and on the lintels of your home and on your foreheads. And there's some other stuff, but the thing that I love about this passage, so as you probably know, Moses comes off the mountain. He has I come with these 10 commandments for all to obey. One of my favorite scenes in movies. But he comes down with the tablets of the law, the Torah, which I just have to say all the time, because the word law in our culture has a very negative connotation. The Hebrews saw the Torah not as pejorative rules, but like their favorite teacher. So when you hear the law or you hear Torah, think about your favorite elementary school teacher. That's how they viewed it. Someone who guided them and taught them and helped them to be the best that they could be. So he comes down, he says, these are the commands of the Lord. There were 2 tablets because, and I'm not going to go into all this, I think I've talked about this before, but 2 tablets because that was just how people made treaties in that day. And so it would have been a complete copy on one tablet, a complete copy on the other tablet. And then he says, here they are, so that you may enter the land, you may multiply greatly, pass these things on. The Shema. So the here Shema in Hebrew encapsulates the idea not just of listening, but of actually doing. It's hearing that promotes action. So it's not just I'm listening to what God says, but I'm also I'm not hearing if it doesn't change what I do. A la James, faith without action is dead. And then, why this statement? The Lord our God is one Lord, because they were in every culture, had multiple gods. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. I could do a whole sermon series and just focus on each one of those words. They each mean a different thing in Hebrew. It's worth studying, but this is what I'm really want to lean on. These words shall be upon your heart, so carry them and then pass them on to the next generation. When you look at the history of Israel, without exception, you see these statements over and over again. So they spend all this time in the wilderness. They enter the land. They take the land, and then I think it's the book of Judges says that basically the grandchildren of the people that entered the land, that they didn't pass it on, and so they turned away from Yahweh and started to follow other idols. And then you have the book of Judges where they have this back and forth, and they go back, and for a while they do this thing where they pass it on, and then it falls away. Again and again and again and again. It's this cycle that doesn't happen where they don't pass on the knowledge of Yahweh to the next generation. And when we say that, we put into that idea of passing it on kind of an idea of what that looks like to us. But God actually lays out, he tells them how to do it. Teach your children. He doesn't say take them to Sunday school or to synagogue school or to temple school. In fact, interestingly, I mean, if you think about ancient Israel, like when they were in the wilderness, when they entered Canaan and they were establishing that, they had, I think it's 3 or 4 times a year where they would go up to the temple or the tabernacle for a while. But in those week by week moments, the synagogue didn't develop till after the Babylonian captivity or during the Babylonian captivity. So what did they do prior to that? God tells them, teach your children when you lie down and when you get up, when you walk by the way. So how do you pass on the knowledge of God to the next generation? One of the best things I've ever heard somebody say, and I do not remember who said it, but that me. God,
It was me.
It was you. You're correct. Coffee. Godliness is caught and not taught. Let me say that again because it's important. Godliness is caught and not taught. That if you cannot pass on the knowledge and understanding of God unless you are with your children physically. I would say that our father, although he did it poorly early on, got much better later on. Chris wrote about this at one point where it was actually more unusual for him not to be around in our later years, probably I'd say about age 12 for me and on, than for him to, he was there most of the time. They homeschooled. And this idea, I mean, it was so important to me that I sort of replicated it. And I'm just talking about me and my kids, but the reason I did what I did with my children, the way I raised them, was because of this passage, partially, that I knew that if I wanted my children to grow up to be followers of Christ, that I had to be with them. And so I rarely was without one or more of my kids in tow somewhere. In fact, I worked at a church one time, and the pastor said to me, I was the student pastor, he was like, you shouldn't be bringing your kids to the church when you're here for work. This is a place of business. They were with me all the time. We homeschooled because I wanted to be with them. And Marilyn did not work outside the home because we wanted one of us to be able to be home with them when they were home all the time. And we wanted to pass on. So when we would go to bed, Mikey and I, for a long time, and it doesn't all have to be Bible stuff, right? So for a long time, we spent every night we would lie in bed and we would do some Bible stuff. And then we would watch, John Green. What is his series on history?
I don't know.
It's a YouTube series. I cannot remember the name of it.
But
it's really good. He is not a Christian by any stretch of the imagination, but we would lie there and we would watch these things on history or various things. And then we would talk about what they said and what does the Bible say and how they interact. My children have talked about, Jesse and Ruthie, they were both very concerned about taking theology at the college. And when they took it, they were both like, well, this is super easy. And they told me this later. And I was like, why was it easy? And they were like, because this is all we did. We would drive around in the car and we would talk about, because we listened to NPR. I listened to talk radio and I listened to NPR and we listened to stuff. And then, people would say things or they would talk about things and I'd pause and I'd be like, okay, what do you think about that? What does the Bible say? And how does this connect? Are they wrong? Are they right? Just all these things, because I wanted to be there, to be with them. Now, so if you have kids, my experience has been, and when my children played sports, I coached. I'm better at baseball than a 5-year-old, but barely. But when we did Taekwondo, I took Taekwondo with them because I wanted to be there with them. When they played baseball or football or basketball, I coached because I wanted to be with them. But what I observed frequently was we, in our culture today, live in a drop-off culture. People say, I want to have children. And then they drop them off at daycare. They drop them off at a sport. They drop them off at public school. They go to church. They drop them off in the nursery. They drop them off in children's church. They, I would love, there ought to be a study somewhere where how much actual one-on-one time do parents actually spend with their children on a weekly basis. And then we wonder why, if you look over generation, why this generation is the least, the word Christian has become almost meaningless today. There are fewer followers of Jesus in America today, true followers of Jesus, than there have ever been, ever in this country's history, because we're not passing it on like Israel. Now, I am not anybody else's judge. I'm saying this is what I did and this is how it worked for me. People have to do different things. But this is the other side of this, I think, is, well, let me pause. Do you want to say anything? And then we'll talk more about it.
Actually, that was a good place to pause. I don't know if you read listened to the video essay I sent you yet, but
I was watching it before you jumped in about losing magic, which is cool. I don't disagree.
being disenchanted, yeah. um, and that the way that we think of first world, for lack of a better term, societies is that we're very rational now, and we don't believe in magic and unsupported theories in religion and things like that. But that is not really the case. It is, your belief in God or in most of the established religions is at an all-time low. But while we look askance at like Central and South America and chupacabras and duendes and other things like that, the belief in things like astrology and spirits and magic in general is, the ability to influence the world is actually pretty high. And this has historically been the case. A lot of the greatest thinkers of the Enlightenment, Newton wrote extensively on alchemy, and what's his name? Descartes was fascinated with magic. He wrote as much on magic as he did on any kind of philosophy, because they saw it as, they actually weren't particularly religious. Newton it was probably a Unitarian, maybe. Anyway, all of that to say, it is not that people can't believe in supernatural things. It is not that people don't want to believe in supernatural things. It's not that people have been convinced that the supernatural is not real. It's that Christians have done such a piss poor job of being Christians and of passing it on to their children as well. But, well, you know what? Being Christian, like all of these things that you're saying, they weren't strategies that you were doing to try to pass on the faith to your children. It was you being a father to your children.
Right. I was just there.
You were just there. And Christians do a sucky job of being Christ in the world. So there's no evidence that Christianity has any positive effect in our lives, except to make us judgmental and prone to conspiracy theories. So why would anybody follow us as opposed to any other fantastical worldview? Right. I don't know. I wonder about that sometimes myself.
And so I tell people your first mission field is to your own kids. Yes. And so
but if you're being Christian, no, I take that back. We've talked about this before. There have been people who were being Christian for the whole world, but except for their children. And
I'll tell you, like Mikey, and I love the fact that he zoned in on this. It's just these moments in the back a ways, a couple of years ago, the curriculum we were using for homeschool in English, one of the things that they would do in the English book was they would like focus on a Christian hero, whoever that may be, an evangelist or a missionary or something. And all the sentences you had to do, all the work you had to do was about that person. So you were learning English, but also learning about a person. And one entire booklet was on Billy Sunday, the Second Great Awakening person. Have I talked about this before? Oh, I'm going to say it again real quickly. And Mike, he said to me, what happened to his kids? And I was like, were his kids Christians? And I was like, that is an interesting question. And I have no idea, because I remember growing up with that and knowing all this stuff. And when I went and did a little research, found out, Billy Sunday basically abandoned his family, he and his wife. They abandoned their children to do this work of God. And I've seen this. It's why the pastor's kid is, I don't know why I keep doing this.
A trope.
Is such a cliche, because it's true. They abandoned their children, and all their children, one killed himself, one died in a drunken car accident, and his daughter hated him so much that, she had nothing to do with him for the rest of her life, basically. So let me be clear. All that I'm saying is not meant to be I'm not poking at other people. I mean, you've got, I'm not anybody else's judge, nor am I their Holy Spirit. I will, this is what we did. And I will say that if you never are with your children, you're going to have a hard time passing on faith. It's just simply the truth. But not everybody listening, and my kids are all grown now. I still have interaction with them, but regularly. But this portion of my life with them is over functionally. Although it is interesting, I was walking through yesterday. So my youngest is 18, and he's like, "Hey, Daddy, you want to sit and watch me kill zombies? I want to show you how good I am." I mean, he's 18 years old, and he just wants me to be with him because we cultivated that. I love that. And I was like, well, right now I'm hanging out with your mother, but tomorrow I will sit down and we will do that.
And the cat's in the cradle.
I know, I thought about that, except when I say it, I mean it. But this concept also applies to discipleship. How do we pass on faith to our spiritual children? Well, how did Jesus do it? He didn't sit in a synagogue and every week have people come to him. He gathered a group and he lived with them for 70 weeks, I believe. But he lived with them so that literally he was teaching them when they laid down and when they got up and when they walked by the way. He taught that he lived with them the gospel. And as they went along, he would teach them things. All these teachings and these parables and stuff that Jesus teaches, they weren't formal teaching times per se. They were just moments that happened as they walked along the way. In fact, as you read the Gospels, that's one of the things that strikes me as I read the Gospels, as I've been working through the life and ministry of Jesus chronologically, is it will say something like, as they were going along, James and John came to Jesus and said, "Hey, Jesus, can we be at your right hand and your left hand?" And he's like, well, it's not mine to give, but you'll get what you get. That's not exactly what he said. But then the others get angry. And so he has this whole thing about, being first and last and all that. That's just a moment that happened because they were there together as they were walking along and it just came up. What does that mean for us? We don't do that in our culture. And one of the things that I love about Celtic Catholicism, like if you read the book, because we did as a group, the Celtic Way of Evangelism, one of the things they talked about was the way Patrick and his followers, they would set up a monastery or whatever near a town, and then people would come in and they would just live with them. And as they lived together, they would pass on. But again, we are so private, I guess. That's probably a bad word. I don't know exactly what I'm saying. There's got to be a way to do this. And I don't have an answer for this. I was reading this today and thinking about what I was going to say. And I was like, so what's the answer? How do we practice when you lie down and when you get up and when you walk by the way and that whole thing in America today? I don't know. Do you know?
Be saints.
Yeah, there you go. But this is the thing. If I can be a great saint, but unless I'm with people, it doesn't help. They're just seeing it from a distance. It's easy to be a saint when because I think that's one of, the self-righteousness. So Jesus, I just finished a sermon for the prison newsletter on Luke 12. Jesus talks about the yeast of the Pharisees and how they're hypocrites. And one of the hypocrisy of, hey, I'm this way on Sunday or when I'm around church people, but in the rest of the world, I'm a different person. It's easy to be a saint when you to put it on to take it off. That's not really being a saint, but to act like it. You can't fake it when people are with you all the time. So how do we do that? How do we practice what Deuteronomy says and what Jesus modeled for us in the Gospels? I don't have an answer. If you have an answer, throw it in the comments, or I would love to hear. There have been books written and stuff like that. When I was a youth pastor, it was my common practice to have teenagers come to the church, and we would just hang out, and they would help with things. Hey, I need some help painting this wall. Can y'all want to come and help? And I would just try to spend time. I would go to the school and hang out. It's just, it feels different with adults. And I know it ought to happen. I just don't know how. So, got anything to add?
No.
So maybe we can figure this out together. So God, give us wisdom. Help us know how to pass on the faith to the next generation of believers in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And to make more saints for next All Saints Day. Amen.